So, our guest today is Tissie Chan, who is qualified and trained as a yoga therapist and acupuncturist based out of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
And today we're going to be talking about fitness for your body type using yogic and ayurvedic principles. We hope you enjoy this episode. It'd be interesting to know, like, how do you, with your background in yoga and like fitness, right? How do you approach like fitness because of your knowledge in yoga?
It's just interesting because I got into CrossFit in a sense because of yoga and what I perceive that I lack. Because yoga is obviously a much softer type of activity, and I don't want to call it a sport or exercise because it's not. But I've been doing it for years, and I realized that I'm really good at doing things soft and slow, but I was pretty shit at doing things hard and fast. And even like, because I did sports when I was a kid, a lot of sports, I've always been into it, but I was always more of a endurance athlete, so cross country running or things that basically required me to go kind of like steady for a long time. So CrossFit really challenged me in being able to do something short, sharp, hard, fast, so it was kind of like trying to plug holes in what I perceived in my fitness, which is that I think it's actually a really important thing to be able to, turn it up, but also turn it down. And most people come at it the other way around. They kind of go hard and fast and they need to learn to slow down. But for me, it was about understanding how to be explosive. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my answer.
No, that's really interesting, actually. I never looked at it in the reverse. I'm probably the majority who think of like, how do I turn it up? Because maybe I feel more like complacent with my approach of a fitness, right? But that could be also because I'm familiar with like Ayurveda, right? So I know that my body type is more kapha, and so I recognize that movement is something that is so critical, like essential for my day-to-day well-being. And so having workouts that like push me, challenge me, really kind of trickle down in the impact in my life, my daily behaviors. By having things that are a bit more slow and complacent can actually reinforce or re-emphasize the fact that oh, I am already like kind of sluggish in nature, or I wouldn't use sluggish as in the actual definition, but I'm slower.
You like to chill.
Yeah, exactly. I like to chill, like take it easy. Like if I only would push myself if other people are around me pushing themselves too. Like I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to push myself.
I understand.
Does that resonate with you or Guni?
You know what? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No,
You
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, for me, I feel like I have both extremes. It's like I really, really like to relax and chill, but I also really enjoy pushing. So, and that's something I think I discovered through CrossFit, is that I have this ability to just really grind that I don't know if I knew about or not, not consciously anyway. So that was a cool discovery.
I guess for me, it's because my is Pitta and Vata. I actually revolve towards more like high intensity, like cardio. I just find it's more soothing, but I actually should practice more according to like our past conversations with different practitioners, is that I should do a bit more of yoga, and I try, but the thing, at some point I'm just like, can we get some action here? But what I picked up on something you said, to see, is you didn't want to label yoga as like a workout or a fitness activity. And I think that's an interesting kind of way to go about it, because today I think a lot of people see yoga as, just about being flexible, downward dog, and have like a very, they see it like a stretching exercise. Do you want to give a bit more light on what the side of yoga that people might not necessarily, the most, general public might not necessarily know?
So this is actually a topic I'm very passionate about, because I learned in a strong traditional lineage, whereby my teacher's teacher was Krishnamacharya's son. So Krishnamacharya being the father of modern yoga. So if you've done yoga, you've basically been taught indirectly by Krishnamacharya. And because of that strong lineage, it's always been passed down to me how much it's not a sport or exercise or just a physical activity. The philosophy being the biggest, most important underlying base to everything that we do. And I think that's how, number one, you need to think about it. It's a philosophy, 100%. It's a school of thought. It has the same roots as Hinduism. It's a orthodox Vedantic school of thought, and there's 6 of them. One of them being kind of what would be called Hinduism now, which is Mimamsa. Is it Mimamsa? Because they had different names then. And then yoga, which is actually because there's a confusion as well if yoga is Hinduism or part of Hinduism. And the answer is actually no, it's not, because it's not a religion. And if you understand the difference between the 6 orthodox schools, then you understand that yoga is actually part almost of this rational kind of school of thought, where it's aligned with something called Samkhya. Samkhya school of thought and yoga belong together, and they believe in this dualistic type of philosophy, which is really interesting. So this is all the stuff that should inform how you practice your yoga, or at least be a filter through which to understand what you're doing. But most people wouldn't you understand probably the words coming out my mouth who are yoga teachers. So yeah, it's not very widely taught or understood.
What is the direct translation of yoga? Because I think that also kind of contributes to understanding the difference.
So there's a few different meanings or translations or definitions. One of the most common ones is yoke. So yoke is to like link or connect things to like a union type thing. But you'll find in different texts, different references and different definitions. So there's quite a lot of ways that you can look at it. Right. I don't know if you were looking something else more specific.
No, that's great. Yeah. And like, okay, so if going back to your explanation about how it's really a philosophy, right? And you know, in the yogic philosophy, I mean, that is there I guess, does it talk about, you know, how you should practice yoga or in a certain way for certain types of body types, or you know, how do you apply that philosophy for fitness in that sense?
Right. So it doesn't necessarily talk about you should in yoga texts, because Ayurveda and yoga are different things. So we shouldn't confuse the two. They are very complementary, and I did study them alongside each other to help inform, because yoga therapy is like Ayurveda is very useful to yoga therapy. But in terms of like classical yoga texts, I can't call to mind anything that says like, if you have this body type, you should do X, Y, and Z. It's more about your mind type. So where you are at mentally, but dosha pertains to your mental state as well. So you can actually have a different physical dosha to a mental dosha. So some people may be like very kapha in their bodies, but they're very pitta in their minds, or very vata in their minds. So it really talks more about, okay, so if this is where you are at mentally, this is the kind of approach you're going to need. And if this is where you're at mentally, then etc. It goes on and on. And you wanted to know how that pertains to sport, right?
To fitness, yeah.
To fitness. So obviously with fitness, if we're talking
health,
about the health, okay. Yeah, I mean, according to Ayurveda, you should shape your whole lifestyle according to your personal unique constitution. And yes, you have the 3 categories, but everybody is completely unique in the way that they fit those doshas. So most people have 2 predominant doshas, where they'll be like Guni, you said Pitta Vata, right? And Tash, I believe you're Kapha Pitta and I'm Pitta Kapha. But some people are tridoshic, which is more rare, but some people are. They tend to be the most like easy, like healthy people, because they've got quite a balance. And some people just have really one as a huge predominance. But within that, even if you've got the same 2 things that are predominant as someone else, it will still be expressed completely uniquely within you. Like I said, there's the mental side of it as well. So that plays a massive role. So yeah, I mean, I remember my teacher once saying like, yeah, if you're Pitta, even things down to the bristles on your toothbrush should be soft, because you're such, you know, like you're a hard personality. So you need softness everywhere. Which I was like, that's damn extreme.
Yeah. And that's really like, it's very specific. And if you want to go to that detail, then really every facet of your life and every element in every facet is going to be
which
Tweet.
is a big challenge, especially as a Pitta Vata person,
For
because
sure.
our modern world is very Pitta Vata, right? It's not very Kappa. So it's actually very hard to surround yourself with things that would bring balance to you when you have that kind of imbalance already.
And usually, how do you get to, so say you have a client that comes to you and kind of seeks your advice for fitness. How do you approach kind of helping them in that journey?
Right. So the most important thing is really understanding what they want and what they need and the balance between those two things. Some people will really be at odds with what they want and what they need. So they'll want something that's really bad for them. And other people, it's quite aligned. So first of all, it's just assessing what's the distance between those two things. Because you always have to meet people where they are. For example, with the fact that you really find it a bit difficult to get into more Kappa kind of practices. Well, the thing is that you actually need to meet your energy. So you probably need to start with a practice that is actually quite physical and then start to wind it down. And thereby you'll tether your mind, you'll get into it and you'll be able to ease into it rather than actually forcing yourself into doing stillness or slowness or whatever it is. Because funnily enough, even though it's soft, that actually could be seen as a form of himsa, which means violent. Because you're forcing yourself to be still. So it's actually going against your nature. So you need to work with people's nature. You need to work with their wants and their desires. So you need to match what's being presented to you. So I have to give you a little bit of what you want. This is if it's at odds of what you need. And then I need to slowly, step by step, which in yoga is called vinyasa krama. This is where vinyasa yoga comes from. Vinyasa krama means basically appropriate steps. So I need to put the appropriate steps in place to then meet my goal or our goal, working together. And it can be like a really, really long process. And you have like your short-term goals and your short-term steps, and then you have your like really long-term goals and your long-term steps. And you don't know if you'll ever meet those long-term goals, but it's, with in mind that you're always going to be working towards it, and it may not be linear, but you're still on that like track and that progress.
Yeah, something to look up for and up to. And when you were saying what's not, sometimes there's not something good for them, what defines something that is not right for them?
So obviously that's according to my perception of what I see in front of me. So like 99% of being a good therapist, in yoga at least, and I'd say probably other therapies as well, is being a good observer. You need to be able to know what is objectively in front of you and what may be your projection and what may be just misinterpretation. So, in yoga, understanding what like your mind in yoga is seen as this filter. So you have your consciousness, so you have your mind, and you then have the object in front of you. So to see clearly, you need to be to have like a clear window. Your mind needs to be a clear window without all the shit that most people get in the way of seeing clearly, like their future projections, their memory, and all that stuff that can cloud what's actually in front of them. So it's almost like a meditation in itself. Working with a client, when you're really, really doing well with a client, it's like almost like it's samadhi, it's integration. I've integrated with that client. So I actually, if you've integrated with a client, you fully understand them, like everything. And it may not even be something you can verbalize, but you just get a feeling for what it's like to be inside that person's body. And it's only very rarely happened like in a very deep way for me, where I've really got this clarity of like, whoa, that's who that person is, and knowing 100%. Otherwise, I'm looking for a lot more like signs and symptoms. So they tell me like, oh, well, I get really hot when I do this, or all the stuff that you would tell like a doctor, that like signs and symptoms. So that's all like information gathering. And then there's just what I can observe, how they speak, how they like move, how they breathe, like all of this is basically, this like ancient traditional medicine before we had machines, right? We couldn't plug them into a machine and measure stuff or do tests and all that kind of thing. So it's like medicine was the art of observation. How well can I read that person's pulse? How well can I feel what's going on in each organ? Because, there's pulse taking in Ayurveda and in yoga as well. So yeah, that's kind of how you do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's really like fascinating. I remember when I came to you, Tissie, for my breathing, to improve my breathing, because I was struggling. I always have sinus issues, right? And so Guni knows all about this when I speak to her. That little, although I wasn't consistent with my practice, coming out of that session with you, I remember like practicing it for the first 2 weeks and seeing such a huge difference in the way I like breathe, or even in the mornings when I wake up, like realizing like, oh my God, I can actually breathe and I don't feel like this blockage, and how much of a difference in quality of like my day-to-day living it made. It's just amazing to see the connection where, you know, a simple thing like your breath work can really make a huge difference.
Shall we go through kind of how you would approach someone who has a specific kind of generalizing body types, and kind of how would you approach them, and so that of course it will never replace having like a one-on-one conversation with a consultant or therapist, but to give like cues for people. Shall we kind of go through those different body types and how you would approach them?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if we just use the Ayurvedic framework of dosha, that's probably the easiest way to do it, and we can do that.
Cool.
So you've got, your listeners may already know this if they've listened to your podcast, but your 3 types, right? So Vata, Kapha, and Pitta. And maybe I can just say that how that loosely links to yoga, because in yoga you have 3 gunas. They are tamas, rajas, and sattva. So sattva loosely aligns with Pitta, and rajas loosely aligns with Vata, and tamas loosely aligns with Kapha, but it's not exactly the same. So for anyone that's kind of a yoga buff, that's how they kind of align with each other. So the kind of things that the stereotypical things that you hear about Kappa is that Kappa tend to be more easygoing in nature. They're steady, they're stubborn people, they can be consistent, they gain weight and muscle mass more easily. They can tend to be shorter as well as bigger, have big features, big beautiful eyes, big lips, big boobs, big bum. Yay. Kappa are awesome, right? This is the thing, is like in our society really like does so much to like almost shame Kappa body types, but they're the most enduring, they're the healthiest by a baseline. Like you want to be Kappa, like they're awesome. So
you could see that it's coming from a Kappa person.
oh yeah, I mean I've got Pitta in me, but I'm like I don't want to identify with my Pitta, like no, I'm totally Pitta as well, but yeah,
it's so interesting that you say that. Like whenever I always want to disassociate from being Kapha, but I know that there's so many good qualities, but I want to like, because I'm always surrounded by a lot of Pitta people in my, especially my family, they just like they shame you for being a Kapha, not knowing that they're talking about that, but they're always shaming those qualities.
Yes,
and they're like, oh, you need to be like more fast, you need to be this, you need to be that, like is it chop chop chop, you know, like always
whereas everyone could do with some kind of steady consistency in their lives, and that's Kappa, which is awesome. It's an awesome quality actually. Like I remember one teacher, to say he was like slightly on the bigger side, so I think he was a little biased as well, but he was like, all these modern day yogis, they're all Vatas, you need to be a Kappa to be a good yoga teacher. I was like, damn straight. It was like, F these skinny white girls.
I love it. Yeah.
So yeah, and then I'll carry on in the description, otherwise we'll go off on a tangent. But then there's Pitta, which is kind of in the middle. They neither gain weight easily or lose weight easily. They're kind of like a medium build generally. They tend to have sharp penetrating gaze, a sharp intellect, very quick, anger easily, good at pushing things through, people of action, and very judgmental. But
I
very
notice we're all
intelligent.
like somewhat Pitta here. So
yes, I know, but I'm looking at you.
what is this supposed to mean? Like really, who's getting angry like quickly? I think all of us here
I
get
do
angry at this
Oh
point.
yeah, love the anger issues. God, so many. But rage is a powerful thing as well. Like it's a very, very fueling thing. A righteous anger is absolutely incredible. So anger is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how it's used or like interacted with. So anyway, that's your Pittas. And then you have Vata, which I have like 0 of. All the tests that I do, I'm like 0, 0, 0, which is quite funny. Vata is like tend to lose weight quickly. So they tend to be of a like slimmer build and taller in general. They tend to have smaller features, small eyes, like kind of like a sharp nose, that kind of thing, dry skin, randomly tend towards constipation. Just going to throw that one out there. But there's so many different things.
I feel like we're all like really biased and trying to shape this conversation to like pro Vata, pro Kapha Pitta, and like
I know, right? No, but they also are extremely creative. Real good movers, real good like just
So are you
can
wait,
come up
sorry,
with
I just want to
amazing
say,
ideas as well.
I just want to say this. So are you saying creative people have constipation issues?
There may be a correlation, but it's not causal. Let's just say that.
That's a good one.
But yeah, they just tend to be like a bit scatty as well, like all over the place, and talk a lot. They talk.
Oh,
right.
interesting. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, creative people is like, but you need to like when you catch them in that, like, you know, they're in the very like windy, basically, like if it even makes sense. So they can take you into tangents and then, you know, just delve into it.
Oh my God, the tangents.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've just worked with a lot of Vata people, and you like ask them a question, you're like, and half an hour later, we're talking about something completely different.
Yes, yeah, that's why like the kapha like kind of mindset of grounding, and you know, it's like, you know, and plus with the pitta, I think that you would work fantastically with Vata people, I'm sure.
I mean, whatever type, you just have to understand what you're working with. Pitta are funny sometimes because they'll give you like one answer, or be like, no. Yeah. Like, really? You're like, okay, so you're a tough nut to crack.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So sometimes I can recognize myself in this, and so sometimes Tasha, she just maybe a bit more like she wants to elaborate. I'm like, no, let's get to the point.
This is a dynamic you see often.
Can we you know,
fine.
structure?
Okay, fine.
And yeah, so I totally relate.
Okay, yeah, not to go on a tangent here, but yeah, go on with your, so with you say Vata, Kapha, and Pitta, so these are their like qualities, and then in terms of like fitness, like how would you kind of tie that in?
Right, so like tends to attract like in life. So what I mean by that is this kind of like how what's called in yoga is one of the klesha. So klesha and yoga are obstacles to us seeing and perceiving clearly, and raga is known as desire or addiction. And what happens is that with addiction and desire is that when we have an imbalance, we are drawn to things that take us further into imbalance. So it tends to be, but not always, what we are drawn to are the things that take us further away from balance. So, you know, I have like, if I have some Kapha people in my yoga class, they might be the ones that like want to lie down and chill and close their eyes and fall asleep. And then like, you know, the Pitta people are like, I want to like push myself. I need to sweat. I need to feel like I've stretched and worked out really hard. I need to feel everything really strongly. And then the Vata people are just like, I'm joking. No, they tend to just enjoy movement, and they might find it harder to focus on like one thing for a long time and do like really slow progressions. So they just want something new and some like variety and something that they're going to find new and interesting. So yeah, that's really stereotypical. So people are obviously so much more complex than that. But if we're going with the stereotypes, then that's the kind of thing.
And if you tie in kind of yoga and CrossFit, how does even, because if you think about yoga just in more the physical activity part, and you put CrossFit together, some people might think that not only are they like school of thoughts that potentially don't match, you know, like there's one is like you know, just a lot of weights and like a lot of pressure on your joints, etc., and one is a bit more flowy or more grounded. So how would you approach that?
So there's a few different things I would love to talk about here. There's one thing that I think that's really interesting about CrossFit that really aligns it with yoga. And that's a more of a my interpretation of CrossFit, and then necessarily because you've got CrossFit, which is the, you know, trademark sport / training modality, and then you've got what you could see as CrossFit, which is like basically being able to be adaptable to anything. And that is something that CrossFit coaches or people that are pro CrossFit do talk about. So this is the more kind of philosophical side of CrossFit, which I really do enjoy, which is that I'm adaptable. I'm training so that I can meet any situation and be able to survive it or thrive in it, or defeat it if I've got a more like, you know, gung-ho kind of attitude. But that's that, you know, that kind of thing that that in the CrossFit Games they'll throw like random events at people, and you know, you just gotta get in there, get stuck in, and be able to survive, if not win. And the best athletes are the most adaptable. And yoga, I don't like the word flexibility in yoga. I prefer adaptability. And I love the idea of being adaptable, because then it takes the onus away from, oh, you can't be good at yoga if you're not flexible, because flexible and adaptable like mean different things. So some people can be very physically flexible, but they're not very adaptable with people. They're not actually physically adaptable as well as mentally or emotionally adaptable. So that doesn't make you good at yoga, being flexible. What makes you good at yoga is your capacity to adapt and to focus. And I think that's very aligned with CrossFit, in fact. I think that obviously how you train that adaptability is it's in such a different way, in many regards, but there are some similarities as well, which I'm going to get into. But yeah, that's the main thing that I think aligns with them. And then something that is not very well known, I think, in modern perception of yoga is that you use weights in yoga. It's actually one of the reasons that I felt confident to start training people, because my background is, you know, yoga and yoga therapy. And obviously I've done CrossFit for however long, and I've gone to some workshops and learning how to, you know, work with people and doing gymnastics and whatever. But it's nothing, it's more been like a hobby for me, but like people kept on asking me to train them. So the only reason I was like, well, I feel confident training because I know what's safe for people's body via doing yoga therapy, because I'm a much softer version. So I'm not going to, you know, get people, I'm not going to kill people. I have no interest in destroying people's bodies, you know. So I'm going to probably be erring on the side of caution when it comes to some things. But you use, so interesting enough, so Vata people tend to be hypermobile, right? So they have too much flexibility. And one of the tactics and techniques you can use in yoga is giving them weights. They hold static positions, and you wait and you load it. So they learn how to endure and solidify positions and build stability. So, you know, that's something that you can really do in a fitness modality as well, is understanding, is someone hypermobile, or are they restricted in mobility? Do I need to get them to do more loaded work or more body weight work? So it is, you know, similar filters that you can also lay over it. It's just what really, really makes the two things very different is the breathing, and the kind of the linking, that there's not that same linking of breath and movement together. So you don't have the ability to really go into these deep states of concentration. Although some people may say when they work out, they get into a state of flow. I would argue a state of flow is quite different from a seated meditation. So there's that.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're describing the Vata perspective of, you know, loading them with weights as they are, you know, holding a, you know, an asana, I guess, it will force them not only to focus on the fact that there's weight, but they also have to, you know, bring themselves back to stillness. So yeah, it's a good combo. It's a good compromise between what they want and what they should practice. What about Pittas?
Yeah.
From a training kind of fitness
training
approach
perspective, yeah.
So I find with Pittas, it's really a head thing of getting them to stop competing all the time and to soften up a little bit and enjoy the journey. So, you know, Pittas generally are more like type people, where they want to be the best at everything. And they want to win and they want to conquer stuff, right? And they want to do things the right way, and they want a really good structure. So it's about like softening those edges and making them feel like it's okay to suck at things, and actually exposing them in a gentle way to things that probably they're not good at, so they can kind of actually feel okay with being vulnerable, and things like that. So, you know, it's not something I consciously tell them, but it's like just trying to, you know, depending on who the type of pitta they are, because like I say, it's really variable. Like I have this one person that's like so fixated on numbers, so it's like I do help them a little bit with their nutrition and stuff as well, just like guidance, like how do I move them away from focusing on numbers and figures and doing things the right way to focusing on how things intrinsically feel. Like, did you feel like you got a good workout? Did you feel like in touch with your body? How did the weight feel? Like, what do you like? When I write this person's programming, I like often won't put numbers for things. I'm like, go about, feel it about 80% ish of what you think you can do, or stop when you think that you've done the maximum that you can think you can do. So it's really making them engage with like what their body feels like when they do things, rather than like an outcome as such. But in terms of physical types, pittas tend to be like down the middle, so you can kind of do quite a lot with them in general, obviously.
And how would you, like, for kaphas, for example, like how would you approach I think they would be like the opposite of like vatas, right?
Really lovingly push them.
How would you do that? How would that look? How does that look like?
How does that look like? Really encouraging. I think, like that's why I mean I'm thinking about them in the context of our society as well, because in the context of society is that they're used to being told that how they approach things slowly, or how they look like, or how they feel like is wrong. So I like to, it's really important to take that context into consideration. So I that's why I say lovingly, because it's about them still being established in their nature, which is a very loving, soft nature, but then letting them but then giving them that kind of challenge and that push, because actually what they need to is to just to keep moving, otherwise they can get really stuck. So what would that look like? I mean, I think verbal cues mean a lot. So how am I talking to this client? How am I interacting with them? How am I making them feel like, you have all this time between, if you're doing strength training, like rest periods, right? What do you do in that rest period? Do I just let them sit down and do nothing? Or do I keep them moving by doing a little bit of like gentle mobility work? And like, how do I interact with them like in the conversations that we have in those rest periods? All that kind of stuff like will contribute to, how they perceive what they have to do, whether it's something that is unenjoyable, enjoyable, whether it's something they're doing because they love themselves or because they hate themselves. And there's so many variables. I could go on and on, but that's just some examples.
I mean, being a kapha person, I think I resonate with that explanation. And also when I did CrossFit, I think that was one of the things about it that I found most enticing. One is the community factor, but also like there's like a standard of what they'll push you to, but then the coaches are there, the good coaches, right? They are there to kind of nurture you in the process, but also challenge you and know, like on the days where you're feeling kind of crap, they kind of check in with you and then say, okay, like you can take it a bit more easier. But on the days where they know you're taking it easy, but know that you should be pushing yourselves, they like come in and say, no, I see that you're just like slacking off here. Like,
I have quite a few kappas in my studio classes that come in, and they'll pick like weights that I think they're nowhere near what they're capable of doing, and they're actually the strongest people in the class, but they have lighter weights than some people that like pittas will pick weights that are above what they can do because they want to like show off and win, right?
I'm just thinking of like my dad and like how anytime, like I was just doing like jump rope, like skipping the other day, and then I was just like doing sprints by myself, and he's like, that's all you're doing? Like I can do more than that. I'm like, I'm not competing with you right now, I'm doing this for myself. Like he's always on to like, it's like, oh, I can do more. Like such a pit, and I see it so obviously now, like he's such a pitta person.
Yeah, I mean, like toxic masculine energy is pitta gone crazy. I mean, that's yeah. But yeah, so I think I can't remember like how this segment started, but basically what you're saying is that I think you were saying in class with the good coaches that they kind of pushed you, and I think that's definitely what with my the kappa people that have come to my classes. I'm just thinking of one in particular, and that thing about lovingly pushing someone is just that you're not saying like, oh, come on, like you can do more, like why aren't you doing more, in a kind of derogatory way. You're like, dude, you're capable of so much more. Like you are amazing. Why aren't you fulfilling your like potential? Like you can do more. And like getting them to be like, okay, I want to do it. And generally people love it when you push them in that way, because you're kind of bigging them up rather than like shooting them down. And
Right.
and I was going to say, like, everybody needs a loving push. I don't think just because someone's a Pitta or a Vata, they don't need it done lovingly. But I just think of Kappas in particular need that extra kind of consideration in some regards.
To kind of wrap that part up, right? So maybe for Kaphas, would you say like something that is intense, but with going with the explanation you gave about Pittas, where you start with something intense and then like let them kind of slow down towards the end. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, Kaphas, CrossFit would be good for Kaphas, but with, you know, coaches that are properly guiding them, because they to push them in that sense. And then maybe like Guni was saying for Pittas.
I think that maybe I don't know if it works quite directly the same way, like starting slow and then going faster. I feel like you probably need to get probably stuck in, because I think that it's almost like if you take that slowly approach them, it might almost make it more difficult for some people to get into the mode of, oh, this is what you're doing. Like it will start to, I don't know, like I don't think I've ever started like that way around with anybody. I think it's more of a taking a consistent approach with them, and being able to make sure that they don't drop off, because I mean the tendency that you may see when people find it very difficult because they have this kind of more of a chilled out nature, let's say, where they don't want to go so hard and so fast, is that they may just be like, oh, like I'm just gonna, this was too intense, I don't like it and I don't want to do it again, or I'm going to stop and I'm going to rest for longer than I need to. So I think it's more of like, okay, just get stuck in, but go at a steady pace. Like don't feel like you have to keep up with everybody, like just do you. And whenever you need to like just take a small pause, but then get back into it. So like, you know, saying if you're doing like a conditioning kind of class or a HIIT class, is saying like, if you're gonna take a pause, you know, count your pause, take 5 seconds and count your 5 seconds and then go back to it and set that time. Don't just let it go on and on and on, because you know the typical Kappa thing is you sit down on the sofa and then 2 hours have passed and you don't realize that time is gone, because you're just so chill that chilling is just like a natural thing, right? So you need to set a limit on that rest time and be like, okay, we're just going to keep going, and you rest is needed, but you're gonna set a limit on that rest time before you get back and do what you need to do.
Awesome. And kind of to close off our conversation, so what are 3 things you would like people to kind of take away in terms of yoga and physical health or physical activity?
Okay, these are the things I wrote down. So
yeah,
I think that number one, that physical health is usually an expression of something deeper. Not always, but you know, 9 times out of 10, when I see people for physical ailments, whatever, there always is like an underlying mental, emotional thing going on. And then also, you know, that there is, you know, it's an inseparable interconnectivity between our physical health and our kind of emotional, psychological health. So that would be number one. Number two, we've kind of like touched on this already, but you know, it bears repeating, that yoga is not about flexibility and stretching. And it doesn't matter like how outwardly good you are at doing poses. It doesn't mean that you're good at yoga. So, you know, don't let the IG yoga picture perfect thing put you off. Like I said to you, I don't even like the word flexibility for that yoga. So it's much more, I would much rather take a student who had the ability to focus over being able to do fancy poses, because they are way more coachable. They're way more teachable, because, you know, it is a skill to be a good student. And there's some people that really, really think they're really good at yoga because they do really cool, crazy poses, right? But in fact, they can be way harder to teach. So, but yeah, just don't buy into any of that bullshit, basically, of what you think you need to be looking like in order to do yoga. And yeah, the last one is that there's always an entry point for whoever you are. So if you're a beginner or whatever, there is going to be something out there that works for you, whether it's yoga or training, and a good teacher or coach will make you feel welcome, and the training or practice will feel accessible if that coach is worthwhile. Okay, so don't feel like there's something wrong with you if you go to a class and feel like I can't do this. It means that the coach didn't provide the kind of environment for you to thrive in, and that's on them. Obviously, like there's stuff that we bring to the table as a student. There always is, but there's no higher compliment as far as I'm concerned than someone who it's their first yoga class and they feel like it was accessible and good for them and they had a good class. Because you have all these classes, I feel like that people come away and feel like, oh, I can't do yoga, like I couldn't keep up and all that kind of stuff. And I just want people to know that who've had that experience, whether it's in physical training, like, you know, fitness, CrossFit, whatever, or if it's a yoga class, that if you're a beginner, like you should be able to feel like what you're doing is accessible. I think I wrote about this in a post the other day, or my stories, that even if a class is advertised as advanced vinyasa flow or whatever, you still have a care of duty as a teacher to look after that person who's come in accidentally into, like, they're a newbie or whatever, or they think that they can do it and actually it's terrible for them because they have poor mobility or whatever it is. You still shouldn't be leaving that class feeling like shit. Like I unless, you know, like I say, you have your own baggage that you bring to it, but there is a care of duty that coaches and teachers have to make things accessible. So yeah, those are my 3.
Awesome.
Those are great tips. I think it's very mindful, like makes people, it's not really about the focal point of like fitness, but it's about, you know, what you're coming, the mindset you're coming to fitness with, right? Yeah, thank you so much for that, Tissie.